So with that, I'll let Neil get us going.
Thank you, Ann. Good morning, everyone. I think it's probably morning for everyone. I always have to think about that when we do one of these. So we're going to talk about mobility, unified communications mobility. And of course, we always start off with a little information about why we think maybe we have something to say in this space. And a lot of you are repeat attendees and know a little bit about us, but some of you might be on the webinar series for the first time. And it's just kind of good to know who we are as we start talking about this stuff. We've been in this business a long time, since long before it was called Unified Communications. And we started, though, in the very early with the concept of building a multi-application platform that could improve business communications. And in the very earliest days, we were doing things simply like voicemail and automated attendant. And then we added some network fax and various other functions. And we just kind of kept growing as the industry around us kept growing and getting more complex. So our mission now is to deliver unified communication solutions on our platform that basically focus on productivity, better communications, increased call completion, all of those things that we think will help an enterprise deal with their business and their customers. We're a little unique in that we make this one product. We're not owned by a company that makes a phone system or a network infrastructure device, so we tend to have a much broader scope in terms of interoperability. We like to be able to work our magic in any customer, but we have a much narrower scope in functionality. As I said, we don't make phone systems and things. We really focus on this part of unified communication. And the way we do that, inside a customer environment, we really look at three areas. We started back kind of over on the right-hand side there with businesses when we did automated attendant, voicemail, some of the very, kind of core solutions that every business needs. And we've been in that part of the business for 35 years. But along the way, we started expanding. One of the areas we expanded into is mobility. As soon as we realized that workers were spending less time sitting at a desk where it was very easy to deliver this kind of functionality, and more time out being mobile, not only in multiple locations, but with multiple devices, we started realizing that we needed a pretty strong focus on how to support those mobile workers. And we're going to talk about that primarily today. We also noticed going through this change that the way teams worked changed dramatically. Teams 15, 20 years ago walked down the hall to the conference room and had a meeting. And that was not too hard to manage. But between better connection across the internet and just the general flexibility in the way people work, Teams is a much more complicated kind of group of people to support. So we have some specific solutions in that area as well. Not really going to talk about those this time, but these are those three areas of business focus. And the way we've done this within our platform is to sort of have three different disciplines. Interoperability is the part of our product that makes sure we will work in the customer's existing environment, plus that the customer can feel safe that they can move forward with our solutions as their environment changes. The communications infrastructure is awfully flexible these days. There's a lot going on out there. And as a result, we like people to know that we'll work with what they have today, but they should be very comfortable that they can move forward as well. We have the voice practice, which is primarily the automated attendant, voice messaging, fax kind of functionality piece. We have the mobility practice, which we're going to talk about today. And we also have the team communications and business process, which is how we work with teams, custom solutions for data access, things like that as well. And we do have webinars on all of these topics. You can kind of keep an eye on your email and you should see things coming through. But for today, we'll talk about mobility. Mobility is kind of interesting. If you think of someone back, let's say 15 years ago, they primarily worked at a desk. Phone calls rang on their desk phone. Maybe if they weren't there, their call forwarded to voicemail, or maybe an assistant took a message and dropped it on their desk. And it was actually fairly simple because customer expectations were simple. But that all changed, and as people started being more mobile, they needed help. And sometimes that was like a group assistant taking messages and trying to find you when an important call came through, something along those lines. What's happened in the last 5 years is that personal assistant category has become an automated application. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about that we offer. the ability to help you in your business when you're not there, with a lot of really nice functionality in terms of delivering calls, taking messages, managing your schedule, etc. So we kind of started with the mobile worker by talking about, and this for us, by the way, was almost 20 years ago, by talking about voice as a powerful interface. I mean, voice is the interface we use the most. It's the most sophisticated. Anyone who's tried to learn a foreign language can attest to the fact that it's much harder to communicate by voice. It's just we're very good at it because we've been doing it our whole lives. So there are things we do with voice that are just very difficult to do over a phone by pressing keys. And the industries, various industries have grown up based on the fact that speech is the best interface if you can figure out how to make it work. So today, speech is no stranger in businesses or just even in the general calling public. If you go out there and look at how effectively things have been deployed, if you look at an airline, if you want to call in and check on the status of your ticket, you know, that 99% of the time, that's going to be a completely automated piece, with the speech recognition being a key part of that. If you look at people that use speech-enabled front ends to their system for automated attendant and how much money that saves them. If you look at the fact that with speech, you can get to more places more efficiently, and that has started to take the time, the latency out of human transactions, which is productivity, but it's also customer service. Some of this is mainstream during the day, some of this only happens at night, some of this is departmental, but the truth is, the technology has been around long enough to be accepted. And certainly in call centers, things like airlines and banks, we're all completely, if not comfortable, at least experienced with having used that. And then, of course, the smartphones took that to the next level, where a lot more people got familiar with how to use speech based on using whatever their smartphone apps use. And now there's probably not too many homes that don't have a speech-driven device in there somewhere that they're using. And desktop applications, although this is more of a niche market still with dictation and things like that, but that's all out there. And the great thing about that for us is, with all that focus on speech recognition, the technology has gotten much, much better, much more reliable, able to handle a cell phone call better, able to handle you know, background noise better, like when you're talking in your car. So what that's done is that's driven it to the level where, from a user point of view, we actually can use this when we're mobile. And there's a lot of advantages to using this when we're mobile. There's the law, for one thing. As most of you know, it's illegal to pick up your phone and then hold it to your head and talk. So that's something that, you know, we've all gotten pretty good at hiding our phone down on our lap when we do that, but not a safe thing, not a good thing to do. With a speech interface, it becomes much easier, much safer, and actually a lot quicker in a lot of ways. So one of the things you can add on the CXE product is speech-enabled user, speech-enabled personal assistant, speech-enabled interface, all of that. As I said, it's been around for almost 20 years. This is not a version 1 of our product. We've been doing this longer than any other product in the market. And as a result, we're pretty comfortable that we have the easiest system to use, the most intuitive, the most reliable. And we've gone through with customers, you know, year after year after year, so we understand what their needs are. So, as an example, I obviously have a speech interface on my product. I get up in the morning, I climb in my car and drive out of my driveway. The first thing I do is push my button on my Bluetooth speakerphone, call into the system, and it says, "Hello, Neil Butler, what would you like to do?" I am now at that same point where most of you are when you sit down at your desk and boot your email system. I'm ready for that first daily triage. I can now say, you know, what are my new messages? What appointments do I have today? I can go through and listen to my emails. Maybe the third email down requires an immediate response. I can respond to that email, even if that's from an external caller, by recording a voice message and have it sent back as an attachment to that. I can forward that message to another user on my system for somebody else to take care of it. If that's an email from an internal person, I can just say call back, and it'll connect me over the telephone to that person. So I have the tools to do that triage in my car in my drive to work. And it gives me access to all my messages. I can read the email over the phone, listen to the voicemail. I can be notified of fax messages and forward them to a fax machine if that's what I want to do. I can read my calendar. I can create a new meeting request. I can invite other people, not only in my company, but other people who are in my contacts to that meeting, and they'll get an email with that request for a meeting. So the kind of things I can do with my system, which make it powerful, can all be done with speech. And for those who are mobile, and most of us are at least mobile in our drive to and from work, but a lot of us are more mobile than that, this is probably the greatest tool to increase productivity and customer responsiveness that you can give to a user. So we're going to go through and just look at a couple of samples here. And each one of these, I think if my computer is going to behave today, we'll be able to go and play a sample for you. So here's the first.
One moment, please. You have 3 unread messages. Message number 1, an email message from Mark Reed. Message subject, the Martin Project. Message body, hi John, we need to talk about the Martin Project. Call me as soon as you can.
Now for a message, I deliberately took an email message because you would all know what a voicemail message sounds like, but this gave you the chance to listen to the text-to-speech. We use the nuanced text-to-speech engine, and it really makes for a completely understandable experience. You can easily read your emails, reply to them, forward them, do all the things you need to do. So message management from a mobile device with a speech interface is one of the great things that you get. You also get the ability to handle calls, both incoming and outgoing calls. So what we'll look at first here is an incoming call, and we'll look at the call screening process that you get and talk a little bit about these options.
You have a call from Mark Reed. Please say accept call, reject call, acknowledge, transfer call, or review call.
Acknowledge.
Please record a brief acknowledgement.
Hi, Mark. I'm in a meeting, and we'll call you back when I get out in about an hour. So here's an example of kind of a new feature that you've probably not seen anywhere before. And what this allows the users to do is decide what's more important, what I'm currently doing or that call that's coming in. And we do that by getting the name of the caller. And now I have some choices. And basically, if this were someone in my system, then I would automatically be able to play their name. If not, when I turn call screening on, I would actually prompt the caller to record their name. And now I have these choices. I can accept the call. This might be a call that I want to take. I say accept call, and the call is transferred to me. That makes sense. If I reject the call, it goes to voicemail. The acknowledge feature you just saw is really unique. It lets you send a message, a brief message to the caller, but not actually commit to take the call. So think if you're just pulling up at work and somebody calls you and you know you're going to be on the phone a long time with them. You don't really want to sit there in your car and have that call. So you can say acknowledge, and then you can say, yeah, John, I just pulled up at work. I'll call you when I get to my desk. So that acknowledge feature is very, very powerful. You could, of course, also choose to transfer that call. You could send it to your desk phone with, fixed mobile convergence. So you have a lot of choices. But the whole point here is it's speech-driven, which means it can do basically all the things you would do on our system, but with a hands-free interface. Here's a calendar access segment.
What to do?
Get my appointments for today.
One moment, please. You have 1 appointment on Tuesday, July 9th. Appointment number 1 is a meeting scheduled by Alan Thomas starting on Tuesday, July 9th at 2 p.m. for 30 minutes. Subject, software update discussion.
So for me, the way I really use the calendar and the speech interface is just this way. On my way to work, I will go in and say, what are my appointments for today? So I know exactly what I'm facing. Other people do more than that. Some people will also use it to create appointments. So maybe that first email that I read in the morning said, maybe it was from one of our salespeople saying, we really need to meet today with the customer that we've been talking to at 2 o'clock. Does that work for you? And you can actually respond to that by saying, create a meeting today at 2 o'clock for 1 hour. Who do you want to invite? The salesperson. Anyone else? The contact, if that name is in your contact. And now that actually gets set up in your calendar and all the invites set out, and it's all taken care of. So what you use really depends on your job, but the ability to have all those capabilities makes that previously not very productive drive time into productive time. Now, I'm not going to run this audio. This is a interesting subject, contacts, but this is probably not how you'd really use it. Yes, you could go in and say, give me the email address and have that email address read to you over the phone. But more importantly, because we have this contacts where they're synced into our product, you can use those contacts to widen the flexibility of the system. As an example, if I get a message and I want somebody in my contacts to get it, I can forward it to them over the phone by saying their name. Yes, I could do that from the email client, but it'd be very difficult in a driving situation to actually do that. I can send a new message to a client, a new voice message. As we saw, I can invite somebody to a meeting. So all of these things that I do for users within my system, I now am extended out. If I, let's say I have Microsoft Exchange, I add a new contact. Now that contact is available for me to use with the speech interface as well. So speech interface, one of the great pieces of productivity for mobility. In terms of making people more responsive and more productive, this is one of the really strong things to do. You don't necessarily want to turn speech on for all your users. You certainly could, but it's really not our vision for people to be sitting at their desk talking to their telephone because you have great tools at your desktop. This is really focused on mobility. The next thing we look at is calls, and we're going to look first here at incoming calls. Obviously, if you're a desk worker, incoming calls are pretty straightforward. It goes to your phone, you answer it, or it goes to voicemail. Not a whole lot of other choices. But as soon as you become mobile, now that might just be going down the hall to a meeting. I mean, mobility doesn't mean out of the building necessarily. It means sort of away from your desk, I think, in this concept. So now the question comes up, how do we handle an incoming call? Well, typical automated attendant transfers it to your phone, and maybe if you have a really good system, it transfers it. If you don't answer, it transfers it to your mobile. Or maybe your telephone system will pair it and ring your mobile device and your desk phone at the same time, which is of some help. But what we're going to do is we're going to route that call based on information about the user that's present in their system, in their various systems within the enterprise. What we learned early on is we can't count on a user to actually do anything. We can't even get them to record new greetings every day anymore. So what we need is a functionality that does two things. First, works without user involvement. And secondly, if we can, let's involve the caller a little more. Let's give them some better information and choices as well. Because we all know if we call somebody for voicemail, as soon as we go to voicemail, we're already unhappy because we didn't get to talk to them. And then if all we get is their generic greeting, then we're even more unhappy because that doesn't really give us information. So here's what we're going to do when a call comes in. We're going to have an availability state that's enabled. Now, availability states are lists of devices at which we'll contact the user. So if my availability state is at my desk, my availability list probably says desk, if he doesn't answer, mobile. That makes perfect sense. But how do we know he's at his desk? That's one of the real tricks here is we can't count on the user to forward phones and do things like that. So what we're going to do is go in and read various pieces of information. First, we'll read the schedule, our own schedule. And the picture in the lower left corner there is the user's look at their schedule with the tool that they can actually modify and change it if they want. But the schedule says, I'm only going to send calls to them at certain times of the day. If you think about those of you that have pairing, twinning, maybe on your phone system where your phone and your mobile phone and desk phone rings at the same time. If that's your personal phone, when you go home, if you don't turn it off, it's going to ring. And nobody really likes that. But if you do turn it off, well, then your mother-in-law can't call you. So maybe you like that part of it. But the end result is it doesn't work very well. Very few systems actually have a schedule that will control that. Ours will. In my case, my schedule says 6 in the morning to 6 at night. If calls come in, then all my rules apply. After those hours, then just send them to voicemail. So that's the first thing we look at. If it's within the schedule, the next thing we're going to look at is the calendar and their instant messaging if they have Skype or Link. And what will that tell us? Well, the calendar will say whether or not they're in a meeting. And if they're in a meeting, we might want to handle that call differently. And we might want to send the call to voicemail if you're in a meeting. We probably definitely want to create a greeting on the fly. It says Neil Butler is in a meeting and won't be available till 11 a.m. But there's other options when you're in a meeting that we're going to look at that are even more effective. But it starts with us knowing you're in that meeting. Instant messaging, if you put your presence in Do Not Disturb, we know that. We can route calls accordingly. If you haven't touched your mouse or your keyboard for a while, you're away from your desk, we might want to change the greeting just to set the caller expectation. But all of this, once it's set up, happens automatically. Up in the upper left corner is our location services, and this is probably the most useful piece for mobile people. And what this does is it lets the users define certain locations that will trigger certain availability states. So the first thing you probably would do, if this was turned on, the administrator turns it on for you, you would go in and build a location called At Work, and you simply turn the phone on, go to our app. It goes out to the cell towers, does a little triangulation, and it'll now know, the app now knows when you're there. Now, this isn't a reporting application. We don't really have any way at all for your management to go in and say, where has that person been, or even where are they now? But we can use that. When a call comes in, if the schedule says, right now the rules are ring them at their desk, and then if they're not there, ring them on their mobile, and we have a schedule or a location assigned to that, we can actually, our system will go out to their mobile and say, are you in the office? Before I ring the phone, are you in the office? No, you're not? Forget it. I'll just go straight to your mobile phone then. So by defining locations, you can change how calls are handled. I actually have a couple of different locations. I have my home office. So when I'm at home, it rings to I have a Skype client that I actually use at my desktop. I have a location for work, rings my phone on my desk. And I have another one called Starbucks, which is actually, I spend at least an afternoon a week down at the local Starbucks reading technical documents. I find it's easier to get away and do that. I put my headsets on, I'm reading the documents. I also have a IP phone on that, and I also have set up a location that knows when I'm at Starbucks. So if calls come in, it'll actually ring the phone on my iPad. I have a headset in, it works fine, and I can take the calls there. So this can be as simple as when I'm in the office, ring my desk. When I'm not, ring my mobile phone, or more complex to handle multiple locations. So it's very easy to set this up and a very powerful tool for increasing call completion. That's what this is really about. I don't think anybody would argue, no matter how good we are at taking a message, you would much rather have us complete that call. And with the latency saved and the customer satisfaction, it's a much better way to go. This is a unique type of application, and people who are mobile come to really rely on this. Now, the mobile client we've talked about actually comes in two flavors. There's a free flavor. So basically, any user can go out to the relevant app site, Google Play, or not iTunes anymore, but the iOS App Store, and download this client. And for free, you'll get a great version of secure messaging, which we'll look at a little later on here. And then you'll have the ability to set up your various mailbox options, your greetings and distribution lists, things like that. There's an additional license, our personal assistant license that we've been talking about, that adds the call screening and the availability and the contact dialing and all those other pieces there. So you really have your choice on how you deploy the mobile client. The core piece of functionality for us for call completion is understanding that users have multiple devices. Almost every user has at least two, a desk phone and a mobile phone. And quite a few have two mobile phones, a work and a personal. And you might actually want to use those at different times. And then things like IP phones on tablets are getting much more prevalent as well. So once you have all those, the most efficient way to distribute calls is through using this availability application. Now, in my case, on an average day, I might get up early. I support the East Coast and occasionally EMEA. I might get up for a 3:30 webinar. I'm done at 4:30. I'm not going back to bed. I climb in my car and I head to work. Now, the computer is actually smart enough to know that while the rule says don't mess with him until 6 o'clock, he's just left home, and it knows that from the location feature. It's now fair game. It'll actually send calls to me for my drive to work. I'll already be logged in. While I'm listening to messages, I'll get a little tone in my ear. It says you have a call from John Smith, and I'll be able to take that call if I want. When I walk in the door, it'll move my calls over to my desk phone, followed by my mobile phone if I don't answer. When I go in a meeting, we're going to do something special in a meeting, but I could easily have it set up to go to voicemail. I go to lunch. Now it's a little different. I wanted to go to my mobile phone, but I want it to go in a different way. We're going to look at these two ways in a couple of slides down. So all of these different solutions, all these different locations can be treated by using a different list of devices. honestly, most people have two choices. At my desk, ring my desk phone. Away at all, in any case at all, ring my mobile phone, and then they wrap that in a nice schedule so they can leave their phone turned on all the time. But just that little piece will increase call completion. By adding the ability to really look at the calendar and the instant messaging piece, this gets much more flexible. Now, most people think the calendar's good because then it can send it to voicemail, and that's good. That is a usage that you might want to use. But at the same time, the building a custom greeting is great for the outside caller. You've really set a good expectation for them. But if you have our mobile device, you get to take it a little bit beyond just going to voicemail when you're in a meeting. Our mobile device has silent call screening. Now what this does is, if it's turned on and your mobile device is enabled for, let's say you say, when I'm in meetings, send it to the data channel on my mobile device. When a call comes in, you'll get a pop-up. It'll show who's calling. As long as that person is in our system or in your contacts, it'll show you who's calling. You probably have a pretty good idea why they're calling. Now I can take that call. Maybe I'm right in the middle of a meeting, but this is an important call. I've been waiting for this call. I go ahead and say, take call, step out in the hallway and take that call. Maybe I look at that person and say, oh, it's him. He calls all the time. I'll just send him to voicemail. But I have other options. If I hit the options button, you see in the middle screen there, there's a number of things I can do. I can record an acknowledgement. So I can hit a button and a little recorder bar will come up and I can say, yeah, John, listen, I'm going to be in the meeting for about 45 minutes. I'll call you when I get out. Or I can transfer it to another device down the hall to take it. I can transfer it to another person. I do all this silently in a meeting. Probably the best piece in a meeting that I find is the actual pick an acknowledgement option, which means I can look over there and hit the "we'll call in 15 minutes," and the caller hears, Neil Butler was unable to take your call, but we'll call you back in 15 minutes. What I've now delivered is the ability to triage incoming calls in a meeting silently, just like we do emails. Very few of us go into a meeting anymore without carrying our device with us, because we all know there are certain things that happen during the day that will get you out of that meeting. But up to now, calls have just had to wait. So now you can triage and handle important calls effectively when you're in meetings as well. What you end up with here is basically a set of rules for how you're going to handle incoming calls. It's a schedule. Then there's various overrides that come into play. The automatic overrides are like the calendar, your presence location that we talked about. The manual overrides allow me to actually go in and say, yes, I know it says I'm in a meeting for 4 hours, but the meeting ended early. I want to change it to normal routing and send it to my desk or my phone, etc. So the user has the ability to do that. And then each of those choices ends up with an availability state that has various lists of the user's device. While this looks fairly complicated on screen, once it's set up, it's automatic. The user doesn't even have to think about it. The correct phone simply rings wherever you are and whatever you're doing. So from a call completion point of view, mobility, while still a challenge, is much easier to manage with this kind of automated system. The next thing we'll look at is, what differs for unified messaging for mobile workers, because that's a little bit of a challenge. And if you go back 20 years, you had a voicemail and it would call your pager and tell you maybe you had a new message, and we lived with that. But there are better options now, and we're going to look at a couple of those. So from a voice messaging point of view, we've been doing voice messaging since day one, literally. We were founded in 1982, and we started making a voicemail system. The first thing we delivered by 1985. We were selling our product through an OEM with US West, and we have been improving that product and adding functionality to it for the last 30-something years. So from our point of view, voice messaging, while the core, it's pretty much handled. We pretty much have gotten down everything we need in the voicemail platform. And unlike all of our competitors, we still have all the legacy features, meaning you can feel safe replacing your legacy voicemail with our system and not fear that you're going to be losing things. But voice messaging evolved over the last 10 years into unified messaging. Unified messaging really is just a way to be more effective handling all your messages, voice, fax, and email. And we're recognized as the leader in the unified messaging field. You can go to various reports, various industry reports, and it'll tell you we're the best of breed provider. And that's partially because we've been doing it for so long, but also by keeping the same product alive. By being lucky enough to have started on open hardware and software, we've been able to continuously improve the product. So we basically do everything. Now, we have separate webinars for unified messaging, so we're not going to go into really great detail with this. We're going to talk just about a couple of features that we think are important in this area. One of the things we talked about early in the very beginning is interoperability. I just want to mention that it certainly is true for unified messaging. We can connect to pretty much any corporate message store. Obviously, the big ones like Office 365 Exchange, Gmail, Notes for those customers that still have Notes, and there's quite a few of them out there, but also other IMAP systems, whatever you have, we're going to be able to deliver unified messaging. And we do it in a lot of different ways. The way we're going to talk about today has become, for many people, the way of choice because it does a number of things that people really feel they need to have done. So we have something we call secure messaging. Now, we can certainly put the messages that we take, the voice messages, into the user's email inbox. That's no problem at all. However, there are concerns about that in terms of discoverability and disclosure, where a lot of people don't want that. And there's also a lot of concern about control of those messages. A lot of corporations consider voice messages corporate property, and they want to make sure they stay within the confines of the corporate environment. So what we do is we leave our messages on the CXE system, but we give the users tools so they can still have the ability to handle them from their various devices. So once the message is on CX, there's things we can do. If you mark a message private on our system, we set it up so it can't be forwarded. We stream messages to the web client, so there's no copy. So you can't go file, attachment, save, or anything, which makes that a secure way to deliver it to users where they have the benefits of having the message, playing the message, forwarding it to other system users, but no way to get it really out of the system. In a mobile device, we copy the message for playback and then delete the message immediately. So same thing, completely secure. You can't get the message out of the system. Plus, if you forget and leave your mobile device in the coffee shop, there's nothing on it that people can get to. The administrator has the ability to revoke access to the mobile client at any time. We're actually using a token technology where the user logs in and then we delete their credentials and give them a security token. So if somebody happens to get a hold of your mobile device, there's no way they can hack it and actually get a hold of your credentials, which most people think is pretty important. So if we're doing it through the web, it's the same kind of process. We leave the messages on our CXE system. We stream it out. They can play it over the PC speakers, but there's no cache copy or anything they can get a hold of at all. This is very important if you're trying to meet specific confidentiality needs. If you're facing HIPAA or FERPA in higher ed, where they're asking you to do due diligence to show information is protected, this application gives you the same exact level of access to voicemail as does a telephone. In other words, you can play it, you can forward it to another user, you can save it, or you can delete it. There's no way to get it out of the system. This makes those kind of HIPAA audits and things like that much simpler to do. The secure messaging on the mobile phone, we've actually designed it for a number of reasons to not keep messages on the phone. Certainly the security piece that we just talked about. But also having messages stored on the phone is a memory issue, and some mobile devices that can be quite an issue. So some of the competing products will store the messages on the phone, but only let you get to 10 messages. If you want to get to message number 11, you have to delete one, something like that. We don't do that. When you log in with our mobile client, we go and get the message list. That's what you're looking at here. When you pick a message, we go ahead and go to the message, play the message, delete the message. So the mobile client is a highly secure way to give you unified messaging on your mobile device while still meeting any kind of security dictates that you might have. Security is a major concern for everyone, and certainly in messaging. So we start with, if you look at our next release of software, CX9, we'll actually have completed our security picture. Messages will be encrypted at rest when they're stored on our system, and the backups will be encrypted as well. If you have a connection out to a mobile or a web client, that will be encrypted and secure. If you have a PBX capable of it, we can even support TLS and secure RP from the phone system into our system. So basically as secure as it can get. And then as we've talked about, the mobile client with security tokens and no audio ability and the private voice messages. We actually recently have kind of tuned up how we handle private messages for those who do want to store their messages in Exchange. Before, if you marked the message as private, we carried the private message tag over to the email system, but the email system would ignore it. It would show it as private, but email systems don't stop you from forwarding messages because they're private. So what we now can do is set up our system that if you have private messages enabled, when you get a message, we'll put an email into your email system, into Exchange, but it'll actually say you have a private message and you have to go get it from the telephone. So we spent a lot of time in the last 3 or 4 software releases really tying down the security side of it. The more mobile we get, the more challenge there is in being able to support all the communications tools that you need, but you really need to pay attention when you do it to make sure not only is it functional, but it's safe and secure for the enterprise. And that brings us to questions.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, so there are a handful of questions that have already been submitted. If you have a question you'd like to put through, go ahead and you'll find the question box if you use the orange arrow in the upper corner, if you've got that minimized, if you'd like to submit a question. Neil, first question, can the user respond to an email with a voice call?
Yes. So if you're reading an email over the phone, we have that user's email address, and it will let you record an audio response, and we will then use that captured email address to send a reply email back with your recorded response as a WAV file attachment.
Okay, next question. I think this must have been in one of the screenshots. What is the review call feature?
Oh, yeah. So for a lot of us, we answer the phone, and by the time we get it up to our ear, we hear, what you should hear is, you have a call from, let's say, John Tyler. But instead, if we're a little slow, you hear, say accept, reject, or acknowledge, and you don't know who it is. So if you say review call, we'll go back to the beginning, play you that first part again, and let you make a choice on how to handle the call.
Okay, next. Is there a notification when a caller doesn't leave a message?
Yes, if you have it turned on, we have missed call notifications. If you have a personal assistant license, once anybody comes in the system and says your name, if they don't leave a message, we will send you a missed call saying you had a call from this person. If they're in your contacts, we'll actually identify it, from this phone number matching your contact, John Tyler. So we do have that capability.
Okay, next. Are AVST customers relying more on their mobile devices rather than traditional desk phones, even when they are in the office?
We keep having these conversations with people that want a world where they only have one phone. And ideally, it would have to be a mobile phone, since sometimes we aren't at the desk. And while we have these conversations, in practice, we don't see too many people rolling out systems where they don't have a desk phone. How much they use it is kind of a personal choice, and it has a certain amount to do with what other features your PBX has to make it easy to move those calls around. So while I think the day is coming where you'll have a phone and it'll be your phone for everything, I don't think we're there yet. I think the fact that the mobile device makers are not the same makers of the telephony infrastructure has kind of made it so those two don't work together as efficiently as they could.
Okay, thanks very much, Neil. Looks like that is a wrap-up of the questions. Just another quick reminder, in case you missed it at the beginning, we will send a follow-up email later today, which will include a link to these slides if you'd like to download them, as well as a link to the recording. And I will also throw in that email a link to our upcoming webinars in case you'd like to get registered for those in advance. And so we just want to take the time to thank you for joining us, and I'll let Neil close us up.
Thank you, Ann. And again, I'd like to echo that thanks. We know it's difficult for you to take time out of your day to go through these. Hopefully you find them interesting. If not, certainly let us know. You will find info@avst.com is a well-tended email address. We will handle anything that comes at it and handle it very quickly and efficiently. So we'd love to get feedback from you on these webinars, suggestions on different ones we do, anything else at all. So with that, I'll say thank you.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.